Hi, everyone. Welcome in, welcome in. Thank you so much for joining us. I see a few familiar faces in the crowd, and as always, Trustee Carla's in the background working for us. Hey, everybody. Hi. Hey, Terry. Give people a couple of minutes to get shuffled in here. So welcome again, and thank you so much for joining us. This is Tango's Women for Women in Tech Talks, where we explore the fabulous journeys of women in technology from all different kinds of backgrounds. My name is Alicia Gale, and as a reminder, the goal of these talks is for Tango to connect with the tech community as a whole, to better understand the industry from specifically the female perspective, and to, of course, participate in the global conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Who is Tango? Tango is working to become the premier nearshore staff augmentation and product development consultancy. And while our culture has always been incredibly inviting, we just took a really honest inventory back in 2020 and decided to just start making some really intentional changes. And what better way to do that than super publicly? So if you're an exceptional engineer, you're based in Mexico or anywhere in Latin America looking for an inclusive environment, definitely check out our website, tango.io. Carla will drop that link for us, but we'd love to have you, and we have tons and tons of openings right now, so feel free to apply, drop us a link, or just let us know. And like I said, we do have Carla Padilla working in the background. She's my amazing off-screen co-host. She'll be in the message board with any questions, making sure we check on those during the Q&A section. She'll be dropping links throughout the talk to any resources that we mention, LinkedIn profiles, and things like that. So thank you so much, Carla. As always, your presence is greatly appreciated. Today, we're joined by Michelle, product manager at Lithia Motors, and Allie, the engineering manager at Fire Hydrant. Both of these amazing women have fantastic insights into not just how to start your career, but how to advance your career in technology. So let's go ahead and welcome our first speaker, Michelle. Soon, I'm going to have to get some wonderful background music so there isn't that moment.
I love it. It's okay. We can navigate the awkwardness.
I just need like a drum roll or something like that. Allie. But thank you so much for joining us, Michelle. If you could tell us just a little bit about yourself and your background, greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Carla. Thank you to Tango. This is just an incredible opportunity to contribute to the conversation. So I'm just going to start off by introducing myself to everybody here who's joined. And then, we'll go from there. So it's perfect. So I might just talk for just a couple minutes just to let everyone get context to who is me. My name is Michelle DelCarlo. I work at Lithia Motors. We are a Fortune 500 company focusing on the automotive industry. So I work specifically in their digital innovation lab as a product manager, where I work to create digital products for our internal customers, like our customer care agents. So I love making things with other people. That is something I just like. It's my passion. I love making things come to life. I'm a pretty interdisciplinary person, and so I have been learning and experimenting and getting knowledge for about 10 years. I've been doing this leading cross-functional product teams for about 10 years. I've had kind of an interesting career. Since I'm so interdisciplinary, I started in the museum world. I have a master's in museum studies. So I worked at the Smithsonian for about 4 years, managing a national network of STEM makerspaces called Spark Lab, which was just like the most nerdy, fun experience of my life. And then I moved into nonprofit work and moved back to Portland about 4 years ago to be close to family and friends, and ended up in the software industry. One really important thing to me is that I am super passionate about reaching my true potential. And I'm really passionate about helping others do that too. So that's kind of a little bit about me. And then Alicia, I just love to talk maybe about why I'm here, and then we can keep it rolling. Is that cool?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, super. Thanks, Carla. I see in the chat you said you love museums. They are such great places to be. Okay, so I am here because as a woman in technology, I specifically have seen the challenging side of the professional world where it can be hard to achieve given biases or, situations beyond our control, or, some unfortunate approaches to work that might keep us from reaching our true potential. And that's why I'm here. I think there's so much opportunity out there, and I think that it's just good to take a realistic look at what might be a challenge or a barrier to our success. So as I mentioned, I transitioned through 2 different career paths, museums to tech. And I had a lot of help in that, specifically through an organization called Portland Women in Tech, PDX WIT. And maybe if it's okay, I could drop a link to their...
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
super. I'll drop a link.
It's fantastic at finding these links faster than anyone else.
Yeah.
If we ever gloss past it, I'm sure she'll find it.
Okay, super. Yeah, but Portland Women in Tech has a formal mentorship program, and I accessed that program to help when I moved back to Portland and decided, you know what, most of my work is in managing products and technology products, and so maybe this is a good career path for me. And my mentor went through a process, like big shout out to Liz Milan, who works at Zoom Info. She was my mentor, and she went through like a specific process for me to identify what skills did I have that I could transfer into the tech industry, and what job titles did she think I would be good for. And so that really was inspiring, and and so it just was a great experience that I thought, I started mentoring other people as well after that. And I saw the challenging side of getting into the tech industry. So that's kind of, Alicia, you and I talked before. That was one of the things that why I'm here today is because I did change careers, and I definitely saw the challenging side of that. There were a few challenges that I saw that I think I've seen other women have, and I think just I've sort of wanted to float those up. I think not knowing where to start is a big one. It's just such a big deal to change careers. Like, where do I even start? Not feeling legitimate was a big one too. Just kind of like, I've been working museums. What does tech have to do with that? But so that was a challenge. Feeling like I didn't belong. People knew all of these acronyms and like all of these, like, what's an endpoint and like what's an integration, and just like I didn't think I would ever be able to understand, but that was not true. So
you have to start somewhere, right? Like, I think the first time I ever heard the term API, I about lost my mind. Like, what is that? How does it work? But so did all of this kind of inspire the document that you sent over, which we'll get to in a second here?
Yeah.
But it did.
Yeah,
okay.
it did. Absolutely. Yeah. So I had success in transitioning into the tech industry, and then I turned around, because I think what's really good to do is my personal philosophy is that as we go along, it's always good to reach back and lift others up. And so what I did is I turned around and I started mentoring other women through the PDX WIT program. And what I realized is that I could take a lot of the product management skills I had learned and apply them to like myself and others, basically creating a strategic plan for growth. I think one of the big messages that I want to send to the women in tech community is rather than thinking about a career change as something that might not happen, like making a plan for inevitable success. And I think that is a very empowering mindset that will allow you to choose to think of discouraging thoughts or messages you might hear as things you can disregard. And that is very empowering. I want to share a personal story that I had, if that's okay, Alicia, about a time where I chose to not listen to a discouraging message. When I was in the process of kind of going through and getting a job in the tech industry, I met with the CEO of a very famous company, and he was like, "Oh, well, I know of a barista job you could have. I could get that for you tomorrow." And I was like, "I have a master's degree. I want to what?" and so it was I chose to not listen to that message that I couldn't achieve in the tech industry at a higher level. I'm sure that will be different for everyone, given your specific situation. And of course, you should always listen to your manager if they're like, "You're not ready for this yet." But it's okay when you hear messages like, "This isn't for you," or, "I'm not sure, I don't understand how your skills fit." it's okay to not listen to that and plan for your own journey. So so I created basically a new to tech strategic plan that's very much inspired by the organized approach I take to product work, that just is like, what are all the steps that my mentors helped me go through to identify what I wanted my journey to be? And then I consolidated that into a specific plan for success that other women could use to actually get their career search organized. And so I'll stop there, but that's kind of the journey I went on.
I mean, no worries at all. I feel like I could listen to this for 3 days straight and not be bored of it at all. But I do want to share this document. Let me see if I can share a screen here. Okay, can you see the document?
I can.
Okay, perfect. Do you mind speaking to this a little bit? Like, I know we just kind of covered what the primary objective is, but if you could sort of walk us through it and just let me know when I should scroll down, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is the document that I'm mentioning. Essentially is a strategic plan for your success if you are looking to break into the tech industry. This is like an open source document I created to just plan for that success. So essentially what I realized is that your career is all about your goals. Like, what do you want out of life? And what do you want out of your profession? And really, that is like the core of your journey, is identifying what it is that you want. So I really think that as you are looking to find a career that you find fulfilling, it all just goes back to like, what are your personal life goals? Like, do you want to make a bunch of money? Which is also fine. Like, do you want to be super rich? That's cool.
Perfectly acceptable goal.
Yeah, totally. That's totally fine. Do you want to have work-life balance? Do you want to be creative every day? Do you want to work in like a cool office? Do you want to feel a certain way? Like, do you want to just be a hermit and work from home like I do? So like, what is it that you personally want? And that will totally help you make the best decisions in your career search. And then professional career goals too, like, again, do you want to make a bunch of money? I'm just being silly, but really, if you like, do you have a specific salary you're targeting, or do you want to grow? Do you want to be a director? Do you want to just code every day? And like, that's just what, you just really want to do that. So just really identifying your goals will help you make good decisions.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I love this section in particular when we're talking about the difference between personal and professional goals, right? Because want to make a ton of money feels like an all-encompassing goal.
Yeah.
There's like certain professional goals. I remember, earlier on in my sales career, someone asked me if I wanted to be a sales leader that manages people or a sales leader that hits strong targets. And that question had really never been posed to me. And so it was such a moment for me of like, wow, really, what are my professional goals? It's not always necessarily the next step, but like, if there's a fork in the road, what side are you on, right? Like, I love digging into that stuff, but go ahead.
No, that's great. Exactly. That's perfect. And then onto the skills. So many of the women I've mentored have been like in the service industry, which is also fabulous. They've maybe done event planning, and those are all really important skills, like coordination, communication, speaking to people, being able to be flexible, like knowing, being detail oriented. Like, those are all very important product management skills. And so I would say, think about what are the skills that you currently have and write them all down. Because I did this, I went through this exercise and I was so surprised like how many skills I already had. And that will help you take those and put them into a resume or like a job application. But it also really will clarify for you, like maybe you have a gap in your skill set and you really want a specific career, and you can, close that gap. So it's just a good exercise to like write everything down.
Well, it allows you to take that translation of like, I've been a barista for 5 years to I have customer success skills or whatever it might be, right? And kind of translating that into a more universal skill. Love it.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. For sure. Yeah, and then same with job titles. So I would say research job titles that interest you. This is a great exercise that I went through. It was like, I think I had contract administrator, product management, or like a program director. I had those all down as job titles. And especially if you're, for example, a barista and you're breaking into the tech industry, so sometimes what I've seen is it can be hard to understand what the job title you should be searching for on like LinkedIn or whatever job search platforms you're using. It can be difficult to understand what to look for. So that's just another helpful tool for you to kind of understand the industry.
Love it.
Yeah, salary. I'm really passionate about pay equity. And so I think this is a great exercise that I was asked to do by one of my mentors is go onto LinkedIn, go on to Glassdoor and search for the salary for the skills that you have and the career title that you want. And it's just important for you to be informed for when you go into a conversation, because you might be a barista making minimum wage, but there is absolutely no reason you should, within reason, be making the market rate for the job that you're going into. So do your research and absolutely educate yourself on salary. So that's, I think, something that I have seen, and I have also been afraid to talk about as a woman, thinking it might somehow reflect poorly on me, but just approach it professionally, be educated, and do your research.
That is just such an absolutely crucial point.
Yeah.
I think we're very often shy away from talking about salary, and we can't. We got to talk about it. Love it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, company culture is another really important thing that I actually didn't research when I was doing my job search, and I added it in here because I was like, oh, yeah, you definitely want to know like what kind of culture you want. And this will help you ask questions in the interview process. So for example, if you're in the service industry, like if you're waiting tables and having a great time, and then you decide, you know what, I really want to do event planning in a tech company. Well, what kind of company do you want to work for? So do your research, ask around. Again, this is a personal thing. So kind of, do you want to work at a place that's fast paced? Do you want more of like a routine culture, like a government agency? Do you want predictability? So really, really understand what kind of culture you're looking for. It's very important.
It prepares you too for those questions in interviews where they're like, hey, do you have any questions about the culture? And you're scrambling your mind and the only thing you can think of is it good? I don't know.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Love
right?
it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then what this one is specific. So specifically, like I would recommend specifically identify companies you want to work for, because at the end of the day, like work essentially means contributing to a company's goals. So you got to identify for yourself what kind, like which company specifically would you be interested in applying to, so this is, again, do your research. I've got the paragraph here sort of says, like, talk to your network, talk to your friends, talk to your family, because I think, some of the mistakes I made early on were kind of saying like, oh, well, I would be happy anywhere. I'd be happy anywhere I could be adaptable to any company, but really doing like specific research on, targeted research on the company you want to work for, I think is pretty crucial. So
kind of ties back to that same concept of salary, right? Like, I'll just take what they give me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then just take notes about what's coming up for you. Maybe just take notes, I think, because that can help you too. So just like a little section for what might be coming up. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and then this is totally an expression of me. This is like the plan. So this essentially is a template for anyone who might be interested in creating a strategic plan for themselves. It's not like a magic. It's not magic. There's no guarantee it'll work. But when I worked with a specific mentee, I was like, let's come up with a 3-month plan and keep track of everything. Essentially turn yourself into a product. Like you are an MVP, you're your own minimum viable product. And like, what specific strategy do you want to take to get the end result that you want? So I could go through here step by step, but essentially I've got little steps you can take along the way. that will eventually lead up to helping you transition from a non-tech position into the tech industry. So it's a good template
Wow.
to adapt. Yeah.
Incredibly detailed. I'm absolutely in love with this document. I'm so glad I didn't have it before when I kind of transitioned to the technical world. But we'll definitely be sending this out in our kind of recap email. Oh boy.
There you go.
In our recap email to everybody. So everybody will get a copy of that document, but I want to spend a little bit of luxury on that, or a little bit of time on that luxuriously, because it's absolutely deserves it. It's so detailed and beautiful. But before we do move on to our second speaker, I did want to talk a little bit about Lithia Women Lead, which is like an annual seminar that y'all do. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lithia is very supportive of women in the workplace, and they have a Lithia Women Lead. It's kind of like a seminar series, which is so good. And over the course of a couple months, they have presentations specifically geared towards leadership that you can drop into as you're available. And they have, I was mentioning, they have this past year, they had Susan Cain come and speak, who is the author of the book Quiet, which is a great resource for those of us who are introverted, but also great leaders. And she came and spoke. And so it's just really important to have that sort of like a speaker series where people are able to openly discuss issues in like a professional capacity, but also just being real. So.
Love it. I love it. Is there any other ways that, aside from just like general support for women, right? Is there any other ways that Lithia Motors supports women or has gives pushes for women in leadership or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. There is a lot of energy and push around making sure that people are elevated. There's the beginnings of ERGs, employee resource groups. There's a lot of conversations around that right now. And we use Microsoft Teams, so there are like Teams channels specifically for supporting conversations. So all of that is just emerging, especially as this digital innovation hub is only about 9 months old. So we're all kind of like responsible for that right now. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. Just one last question, I promise, and then I'll let you. Great. I'm asking you everything. But did you have any other resources, whether it be, books, websites? I know we mentioned PDX and Quiet, but are there any other resources that you can think of that would be helpful?
Absolutely. I would highly, highly recommend Harvard Business Review on LinkedIn. They have really cool posts that I follow that are wonderful. And some of them are, actually quite a lot of them recently are geared towards diversity, equity, inclusion, specifically around women. There was an article recently about the tasks that some women volunteer for that don't get them promoted. And so I think it's very interesting. They have a very interesting and a look into work specifically, and specifically around like how do women advance or not advance based on roles that they're typically seen for. So that's, I think, very interesting to me.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Awesome.
Carla is like furiously looking for that link right now. I'm here in a second, but thank you so much, Michelle. We'll see you in a little bit for our Q&A session, but thank you so much. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me. See you soon.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Let's go ahead and welcome Allie. I was going to say on stage. That sounds so silly. On screen. And as a reminder, Allie is the engineering manager over at Fire Hydrant. And she has some very interesting things to say about, kind of advancing your career more than just starting things. Hey, Allie.
Hey.
How are things going for you?
They're going really well. I'm so stoked that I get to follow Michelle. She has so many great ideas that I absolutely share. So that was really great to listen to.
Awesome. Well, I know I'm previously talking with you. You have tons of fantastic things to share as well. So could you kick it off with a little bit of an introduction to your past experience or your journey in tech?
My journey, yes. So I come from an unconventional tech background. For the first few years of my working career, I actually ran safaris in Southern Africa, like operationally. And So very, very different than what I'm doing now. But in my mid-20s, I read a book called The Passion Test, which I highly recommend. That actually does it kind of like breaks down the first part of Michelle's document, which is, where are your passions? What do you want? And it's I mean, I like that part. It's a little bit of a hokey book, so a grain of salt there. But what it did is it helped me narrow down what I really want in my life, and then how to measure that, how to visualize it, and how to be super accurate about getting it. And what that led me to was becoming a programmer. I went to Hack Right Academy. I actually see one of my old students in the audience right now, so stoked about that. And from there, I became an engineer and eventually a manager. And now I work at Fire Hydrant IO, which is an incident management software. We're really cool. And I actually see a few of my reports in the audience as well. So a lot of people have been with me on my journey.
I love that. I love that. And can you tell us a little bit more about Fire Hydrant? I know the last time we talked, we were talking specifically about the numbers of women in leadership there, and I'm just so excited for you to brag about this.
This is true. We didn't mean to do this, but a happy coincidence, we actually all female engineering managers right now.
Snaps to that.
It just happened. Very excited about that. But I think what's exciting about Fire Hydrant isn't necessarily the proportion of women. It's how we've built in equity and objectivity into our processes, and that goes into a little bit into leveling documentation. So how you level up, and hiring, and kind of removing any subjectivity in bringing people on. And promoting them, because what you really want in a situation where you could add a lot of unconscious bias is to create a system where there's clear expectations and where people who are ambitious and smart, regardless of gender and culture, can be promoted, can be elevated.
Abso-freaking-lutely. I love that. And if there's, I know you're building out this leveling document for your team currently, right?
Yeah, actually, since we talked, it's been in rotation a bit. So
love it.
It's in the wild now.
So for anyone who doesn't know exactly what a leveling document is or how to create one, could you sort of walk us through the basics of it, what the process that you follow, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. A leveling document, I call it the grid. Cue Tron joke. It's a grid of software engineer level with the skills that we expect from a software engineer and how each skill evolves for each level. So the idea is that if you are a senior software engineer, you're able to check every single box for that skill. And if you want to be promoted to the next level, in our case as a staff engineer, you know exactly what skills you need to improve upon in order to get there. And the idea is if you walk through this with your manager and you're able to check off every box, they have no platform to say, no, you can't get a promotion. At that point, it's out of their hands. You get promoted. And that's the beautiful part of objectivity, is that your progression, your ambition is in your hands.
And I feel like that's the solvent for women in technology, right? Like there's so much bias, and that's exactly what we're up against all the time and trying to push through. So by creating a document that is essentially pulling away that bias, you're taking out such a huge barrier for women. It's a huge, huge deal. I absolutely love it. If you have any examples of your leveling document that you could send over to us, I know it was still in development last time we talked, so I didn't want to ask you for it, but anything in that regard that you could share, I'd love to see it and share it out.
I will share something. I don't know if I can share out exactly what Fire Hydrant has, but I will send something so you all have an idea of the skills that we expect and how they level up a little bit. Awesome. One other thing I wanted to mention that Michelle mentioned was pay equity. That's also something that Fire Hydrant cares very deeply about. Obviously, transparency is the cornerstone of having pay equity. One other thing that Fire Hydrant does that a lot of other companies that I've worked for done is if someone is at a level, they get paid the same amount as anyone else at that level. So if you get hired as a senior software engineer, There's no negotiations. It's just, this is how much we offer. It's how much everyone else at this level gets paid. And what that means is that you don't have to worry about someone coming in with the ability to negotiate and to push, which men statistically do more of. They ask more and they get more. So when you have just a single line, no negotiation, equity just falls naturally.
Absolutely love that. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, even though I could talk about this leveling document for years and years. I absolutely love it. But the reason that we had reached out to you initially is we saw you at a conference talking about like naming conventions and code. And it's such an interesting idea for me that I kind of wanted to put you on the spot a little bit and have you talk a little bit about it and sort of walk through like a short version of it. Is that all right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Let me see if I remember that conference talk. Yeah. At my last company, I worked at a company called NoRed Inc. Our front end language was a functional programming language called Elm, which is a very niche language in case any of y'all know it. And I wrote a talk about naming conventions in Elm and how they can actually improve your code. So it was doing things like creating baseline rules for, I mean, whoever's in the audience is going to know, name your Booleans. Don't just have like a random true false in there, not knowing what that means. Being able to break down functions into really easy to understand function names. And I kind of showed examples of how you can condense code and make it really clear and actually more performant with better naming. But don't ask me to live code right now because I do not remember.
And I think that's perfectly fine. But it was such an interesting talk because you had used a couple of different tricks, and I can't remember off the top of my head now, but a couple of tricks with the audience that really got me thinking about naming conventions and code code, Allie. So that's like a whole.
Oh yeah, I asked people how many. I put like a random string of characters on the screen, and I asked people to remember it. And the idea was just to put in that a human can only really hold 2 to 9 of the same things in their brain at one point. I think I put like 11 characters up there. What ended up, I mean, I think it was the point is like naming is important because you want to keep less in your mind. But what ended up happening is at the end of that talk, a bunch of people came up to me and they were like, I actually remember the entire string. And I'm like, I don't know if that was the point.
I think the follow-up question to that would be, how many digits of pi do you remember? You know what I mean? Like, do you just naturally remember things really well?
No, the point is I don't. That's why I need to have good naming.
And I'm going to pivot yet again. I apologize. My list of questions for you is just completely disorganized because I have so many different things to ask you. But I want to pivot and talk a little bit more about like your past experience. So pre-Fire Hydrant, I want to talk about, are there any, and we don't have to like name companies or anything like that, but any specific challenges that you may have seen in your past with tech or transitioning to tech that you would maybe want to give some advice to anyone who might be in the same position?
Yeah, I think the number one thing, if I had to impart to anyone listening who is looking to get promoted, looking to join tech, is ask everyone for help. Ask everyone who can help for exactly what you want. Be clear about what you want. Because when you have this brings us back to objectivity. When you have like a general idea of where you want to go, and sometimes it's just like up, I want to go up, which is fine. What happens is that person suddenly has power to tell you where you're going to be going. Go up. Yep. And it adds subjectivity. Subjectivity opens the door for unconscious bias or sometimes conscious bias. And when you have a very clear understanding of this is what I want to work on, this is what I want to do, this is how I'm working toward it, they don't have to think at all. They're just going to help you. Their way is clear. People like to be told what to do exactly. And when you have exactly what you need for them to do, it makes your path a lot clearer. So I think one of the problems that I had early on in career is I just wanted to be a software engineer. And I'm sure you all know there are a lot of different types of software engineers. There's a lot of different companies that you can work at, different teams you can want, different dynamics and culture. Using Michelle's document is a great way to kind of narrow down what you want. But when you show passion for the things that people have built, either their code base or their company, they want to bring you on. They want to have people who are passionate about what they're working on.
And when you said that when you first kind of thought about going into the industry, or first entered the industry, right, you just wanted to be a software engineer, period, point blank. Were there particular like languages that drew you in? Were there particular things that drew you in? Like, what made it interesting for you?
Yeah, I actually wanted to be a software engineer after I graduated Hackbright. I joined Hackbright. This is the engineering school for women. Because I wanted, this is according to the passion test, my like results were, I wanted to work on a team, and I wanted to work on something that I would get excited to work on when I woke up in the morning. And so it led me to engineering, but it wasn't that I just wanted to be a software engineer. I had taken a college course in computer science, and my girlfriend at the time told me that the code that I wrote there was the most inelegant code she had ever seen. And and it's true. I didn't know how to write loops then, so it's valid. But I did love it. And if I thought, if I get good at this, then I get to do something I love for my job. And it's not like a bad career. It's a great career. It's a skill. So when I started interviewing, I was kind of just like, I want to work on a team. And I want nice people around me. And thankfully, I was able to find a great team with nice people. But I wish I'd been a little bit more focused. And this next time around, I was a little bit more focused.
Well, I think one of my favorite sayings is you can't hit a target if you don't know what it looks like. And I think that, you know, there's different kind of levels of focus there, right? When you're imagining like a target, there's the bullseye and then there's all these outer rings. And I think when you're defining those outer rings of I want to be on a team and I like software engineering, like you're just narrowing down the focus into that center. I love Michelle's document for being able to like narrow in, but I don't think there's any, you know, shame or problem with just saying like, yeah, I want to work on a team. I want to be in a happy place. I want to make tons of money, whatever it might be.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And making tons of money is not a poor goal to have.
Yeah, my wife and I have a term that we use, and it sounds like a bad word. It's not. The word is ambitchy. It's you're ambitious and you're itchy. You're itchy to be. You're like I want a promotion. I want to do something. I have capacity. And so when you say I'm feeling ambitchy, then you're like, well, what are you going to do about it? And that's okay. That's where you start, you know, and then you become more clear about where you want to go. I realized I didn't answer a question which you asked, which is what languages that I started out with and what I recommend. I started out in college with Java, but I quickly forgot that. I started Python at Hackbright, and that Python's a great beginner language. It was made to be a language to teach like Norwegian kids how to speak English. So it's a very it's like an English. It's like reading, very Englishy, very readable. So that's a great place to start. JavaScript is super fun because you get to like see something on a screen, and that's very satisfying, especially for future front end programmers. But really, it doesn't super matter which language you choose. But I would caution that whichever language you choose, make sure that their community is open to teaching new people. Python is a great one. Ruby is excellent for that. I'll give you an example. Haskell's maybe like not the most friendly community for newcomers. They're like, here's a giant book. Good luck, you know, and it's like hazing almost. So yeah.
I love that. And aside from all of the other resources that we talked about, because I know we've talked about numerous, and Carla is doing a fantastic job just like hammering out those links in the comment section. But is there any other resources that you would recommend to someone either starting out in technology or looking to take the next step?
Yeah, I have a book that's I recommend to everyone, regardless of technology or not. And the book is Crucial Conversations. I think the tagline is how to have conversations when the stakes are high. And it's the ability to have a conversation and basically give feedback, receive feedback, and how to do it without creating bad feelings. And it's about creating safety. It's about learning to identify when someone's not feeling safe. And it helps you. It helped me in all of my relationships, professional and personal. But it especially helped me in communicating with my manager. I really believe that when you are at your comfort level and then you kind of go one little level up, that little space of vulnerability is where the good stuff happens. That's like the nuggets of goal. All your goals are right there. And in order to have those conversations, you need to have the tools, and Crucial Conversations really help me with that.
Awesome. And it looks like Carl already dropped the link. Killing it today. So I do see that we already have 5 questions in the question session here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull on Michelle, and we'll start our Q&A session. If anybody else does have any questions, though, please continue to drop those questions. If we don't get to any of the questions today, like there's a few that are left off or something like that, we'll be sure to talk with Allie and Michelle and get those addressed for y'all and send it out in the email. Hey again, Michelle.
Hey,
there we go.
Michelle. Hey, Allie. Hey, how's it going? Loved your talk.
Thank you.
All right. So first things first, for Michelle, what made you want to become a project manager?
Yeah, totally. So this is an important point. So my job title is product manager. And I wanted to become a product manager because I think it's the most fun. I think others would argue with me, but essentially it's the person who sits at the center of the business requirements, the customer needs, and technology capabilities. So I think it's really, really, really fun to be at the center of all of that and to be able to look at all of the constraints and opportunities from each of those 3 sectors and then say, what can we produce that has value to our customer with all of this in mind? So I think it's a really creative space. And it's a one-to-one for what I was previously doing in my last job, which was sitting at the center of community needs, the resource capabilities of our company, and the mission of our organization. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Love it. And then a question for both of y'all: How do you deal with being overwhelmed or underperforming?
With someone who is doing that, or when I'm underperforming?
Oh, when you're
overwhelmed.
Underperforming, but I think either way too, right? If you have somebody on your team maybe that's feeling super overwhelmed or underperforming, how would you handle that situation?
Being underperforming is a very classic symptom of being overwhelmed, and if I'm feeling overwhelmed, my first instinct is to go talk to my manager. Again, that kind of little space between where you're comfortable and that vulnerability is where you really are able to communicate your needs. Creating usually what my manager has done in the past is help me create a list of priorities and then kind of create an MVP of those priorities to help whittle down what's on my plate. If someone is underperforming on my team, that becomes a situation where I need to understand what's going on holistically. There are 1,000 reasons why someone might be underperforming. And it is not a go-to, hey, get your stuff together. It's, hey, what can I do to support you? What's going on with you? Let's understand what's happening. And from there, obviously, there are 1,000 different branches to help them.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Michelle?
Yeah, I think the way that Allie described it is really great. And I think what I would also add is it makes me think about expectation communication. So product managers typically aren't supervising people on a team, but they are leading. And so I have a team of 6 people that I lead. And if I have a team member who is underperforming, typically I'll make sure that they know what's expected of them. So we have like quarterly planning, we have sprint planning. And if they're not meeting those specific goals, then we can have a conversation about why. And that's when I would lean on a partnership with an engineering manager like Allie and say, hey, I think this might need to get escalated. We've got some folks who need some help. So I think that would be where I would lean into is the structure and just making sure folks know what's expected of them. But I do get overwhelmed sometimes too when it's like there's just so much to do. There's so many problems to identify. And taking PTO is a big deal. Like, make sure you take your PTO and do that.
Definitely take some time for yourself. But I like what you said about setting standard expectations too. I think that is such a crucial difference, right? Because that kind of leans into those crucial conversations. Mm-hmm. If you don't have solid expectations, then the conversation starts off with, hey, you're underperforming. Whereas if there's expectations already set, right, then it leans right into that conversation of, hey, I know you're underperforming. How can I support you, right? It's a very interesting distinction there. Allie, question specifically for you. In your experience, does being a woman in your profession come with extra mental challenges that you have to overcome? For instance, doubting your own ability. I think we covered this a little bit, but if you had any other thoughts on that.
Oh my gosh, yes. Imposter syndrome is a real thing. Every woman engineer I've ever spoken to has had imposter syndrome. It's real. It's something not to avoid talking about. What we end up doing as women is we keep moving the goalposts. So we say, I'm not really an engineer until I do this. And then you do that. And then you're like, okay, but I'm not really an engineer until I do that. And you keep moving these goalposts. You have to sit down, you have to write down, when I do this, I am an engineer. Brand it to the backside of your eyelids and make that your goalpost. Once you've done that, you're there. So that's a very big mental hurdle for a lot of women. Another thing that I've run into is that sometimes as a woman, you have the burden of educating people about sensitive communication. And that can be very difficult. You just want to be an engineer, you just want to code, but somehow you're sitting there talking to someone about why what they said was maybe offensive or wasn't very sensitive. And that shouldn't be on you, but it does sometimes fall on our shoulders. So, obviously that's a moment that you have to bring in your manager. You have to make sure that this isn't something that will fall on your shoulders again and again and again, because I guarantee you it will sometimes at certain companies. So an unfortunate reality, which I'm sure that's not specific to engineers. It's really throughout a lot of companies. I'm sure Michelle has encountered that as well. Yeah.
Did you have anything to add to that, Michelle?
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I think those have been the most challenging moments, I think, in my career, where my focus has been, hey, this is what I want to deliver. This is what the value I want to provide to my customer. And instead, the conversation has to shift to, hey, this is how I want to work with you. And that is a huge lift to take on and to commit to, because, it feels risky sometimes. And so that I definitely identify with that for sure.
Okay. And then one more question for both of y'all. How much do you think the industry has changed since you've joined?
I'll let you go first, Michelle.
Sounds good. Let me see. I'm thinking about Portland. So let me think about Portland specifically. I feel like there has been more activity and more voices. More people are joining the industry that weren't there before. So people like me who have great skills that are transferring. And I think a lot of the conversations have shifted from how do we develop the pipeline, which was the big topic when I was getting into the industry. Like, we want diversity and inclusion, but we are having trouble finding folks. And now it's, how do we keep good people? How do we commit to diversity, not just say we're doing it? How do we actually play that out in real time? So I think that would be, kind of what I've said. I would say the industry has changed, specifically in Portland. Yeah.
Allie?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that sentiment. Throughout the tech industry, there's been there's been an increase in diversity, and diversity crossing gender, sexuality, culture, but also age, cognitive diversity. There's things that people bring into the team that you don't expect, both good and challenging. I think it's what's been really nice in the companies that I've worked at is that there's been a push to avoid a monoculture, which is you bring people on who you can be friends with and grow out with or whatever. And that you really try to avoid that. Diversity is helpful for a team, and I think that companies are beginning to see that. And so, being able to create interview processes that allow for people to filter for kindness, for culture fit, but not necessarily filter on, is this going to be my buddy?
Right.
Yeah, that's been really nice to see.
Well, and very much to that point, I feel like we have been seeing a lot more about, I think it's Blizzard activation or something like that. The company that, if anyone here doesn't know, have recently started being involved in a lawsuit due to their sexual discrimination and sexual harassment towards women. But it seems to be exactly that same way, right? When you said that bro out culture, it's immediately what made me think of that, is that their culture has been described as like a frat boy culture, where there's a lot of like drinking on the job and things like that are just super not appropriate, but worst of all being like the sexual harassment and things of that nature. But I think the fact that those kinds of cultures can happen really at all previously, just kind of shows us there is some changes that are happening. The fact that there's lawsuits that are happening towards things like that shows me that there is a little bit of growth, but it also shows me there's a long way to go, right? I mean, we still have a little ways to go that's just now being called to attention, right? But okay, awesome. I don't see any other questions. Does anyone have any last minute questions for Allie and Michelle before we adjourn for the day? I'm telling y'all, I need background music so bad. I want like some Jeopardy. Awesome. Well, I don't see anything drop in, but if we do get any last minute questions shot into the chat, we'll be sure to email y'all and get those answers and send it out in our email with the recording. But thank you both so much for hopping on and sharing your amazing wisdom with us and your documents and everything else. We greatly appreciate it. And I know all the listeners appreciate it as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a great day.